From the longing that told you it was time for a change, for the courage it took to answer the call, for the choice already made, and for the daily choices that will shape life ahead of you, for the communities that have shown you who you are, and the new communities waiting to discover you in new ventures, for the great mystery of what lies ahead. May you see something of beauty along the way. Touch hands with those you love and give more than you get.
Today, we're going to ask the kids to stay in your seats because you'll be able to see better. I think I have a few friends who are helping me with this today. So if you'll come stand behind me while I explain a little bit. How many of you have heard about some of the stories of Hercules? Yeah, some of you? Okay. I think Reverend Nick's going to talk about that a little bit more today. So I thought I'd give us just a little skit to kind of think about where the monsters might lie and where they might exist today. So you're going to have to imagine me as a modern day Hercules. It's not all about brawn, I tell you. And what is one of the most famous monsters that Hercules defeated? Who knows? The Hydra. Raise your hand. The Hydra. We have some modern day Hydra here today, like racism that rears its ugly head. When some people are saying Black Lives Matter, there's people saying all lives matter. There are people who are saying, but that was so long ago. Can't they just forget that? There's no place to be talking about that now. Why are we stuck in the past? And yet there are young Black men being hurt by people who are supposed to serve. And they're raising their hands and saying, stop, don't shoot. And so we have to slay racism. But hopelessness is there raising its ugly head, going, the seas are rising and there's not enough money and there's food scarcity and poverty and people without jobs and a mental health crisis and a health system failing us. And we have to slay hopelessness because it will immobilize us. And there, homophobia and transphobia rears its ugly head, saying, you don't get to choose who you love and who you are. And love is between a man and a woman, and there's men and there's women, and there's a binary, and that's what's good and holds order in this world. How dare you? And we say, oh no, not today, Hydra. And slay transphobia and homophobia. Oh, look at this. Every time I cut one head off, 3 grow back in its place. I don't think I can do this alone because I am but one person. And so I'm going to leave this without a conclusion, without a happy ending, because I think the kids are going to go to their spaces and think about how, as a community, we can rally against these modern day monsters. And I think Reverend Nick is going to help all of you who choose to stay in this space think about how together we can come together. We can use our brawn, our wit, our resources to slay those monsters for good.
From Hydra slaying to Hydra transformation. Before this week, my memories of Greek and Roman mythology were vague. When I saw the topic for this sermon, I needed to do some research and clear up some confusion. I learned, for example, that Medusa, one of 3 human sisters with snaky locks, was not the same as the Hydra, even though they had snakes in common. The Hydra, created by the goddess Hera, was a serpent with many heads living in the lake of Lerna, an entrance to the underworld. It had to be eliminated because it was slithering through the local area, devouring cattle, sheep, and humans. Hercules, the illegitimate son of Zeus, was tasked with slaying Hydra, one of 12 different missions he needed to complete as penance for his part in a previous tragedy. The Hydra's many venomous snake heads, reeking of horrific odor, seemed impossible to conquer. As soon as Hercules cut off one head with his sword, one or more new ones would quickly replace it. He needed a different approach to the problem. With the help of his nephew Lolos, he cauterized the stumps with a flaming torch. This worked well, except for the last head, which could not be detached by any weapon. He had to go at this one hands-on, stunning it and then tearing it off by brute force and burying it. This would make a great action-adventure story, a candidate for film animation with plenty of gore and violence. But what does it mean for you and me? What can we apply to our own lives, our own efforts to conquer metaphoric monsters? I think that as individuals and as a congregation, we can glean some ideas about how to tackle the many social injustice monsters in our world. There are two approaches that I think of often. First, as a kid in the 1950s, I loved singing a certain song when Frank Sinatra came on the radio. He belted it out over the radio waves with high hopes. Remember that song about the ant and the rubber tree plant and the ram and the dam? It's still one of my favorites, partly because it's fun and easy to remember, and partly because I like 2 points that it makes. 1, no task is too big, and 2, keep trying. You might also recognize this quote from Harry S. Truman: "Do what you can with what you have where you are," unquote. It is a simple but empowering statement. It lets me decide what to do without concern about any specified level to seek. It makes me take stock. It keeps me going. From such a simple recipe for action comes the realization that I can contribute my skills and my time. I can be patient and persistent. I can work with a team, and I can share a chunk of my income. I've not always had these options for action. I was a late bloomer. I didn't earn a college degree at the normal age. I didn't jump into a serious career, and I found myself more slowly than others. I didn't feel confident, develop good skills, or begin earning enough for discretionary spending until I was well into my 40s. I feel grateful every day now for the positive life changes that finally did come my way, including the move to Columbus and becoming a member of this congregation. Gratitude for my relatively good fortune is what makes me want to give back. I have time now to volunteer. I am currently donating time to our hospice, to the Veterans Treatment Court, to our racial justice team, and to the NAACP. Inside UCCI, I've helped with fundraising, children's RE, governance, and obviously the Sunday services team. All these activities make me feel valued as a person while also helping the people in my Columbus family, both close at hand and in the broader community. I know that others in our congregation are doing similar things in the community that align with their passions for our environment, for our children, for social justice issues and for other causes on a list much bigger than the 12 labors of Hercules. As a group, we form a transformed Hydra, a good sort of Hydra that has many heads, thinking up ways time after time to take positive, courageous action. I know from experience that sharing that generous chunk of income and doing what you can with what you have enriches your life and feels good. I know all of you who are already participating in this way would agree. I encourage those of wavering on the fringes of decision to join our Good Hydra action team by any means you can. Every element of generosity, whether through volunteering or in monetary terms, demonstrates good Hydra power for this congregation and our broader community. This is not the reading in the order of service. This reading is The Soul of Money, Reclaiming the Wealth of Our Inner Resources by Lynn Twist, an excerpt from that reading. Collaboration and reciprocity, from the word reciprocal, are natural. And yet, in the world we inhabit, competition and the fear of scarcity often block us from seeing these ways of being with one another. In a you or me world, reciprocity and collaboration don't fit. In a you and me world is full of collaborators, partners, sharing, and reciprocity. In that world, our resources are not only enough, they are infinite. When we bring the practice of collaboration and reciprocity into conscious view in everyday life, a kind of alchemy and prosperity await discovery all around us. Connections forged in a mindset of scarcity, acting on the belief that that's not enough, more is better, or that's just the way it is. No matter how strong those mindsets may seem in the moment, are inherently self-limiting. Grounded in a lie, they only undermine our chances for long-term survival and sustainability. The kinds of connections that truly protect and preserve us are those that emerge from the context of sufficiency and the sharing, diversity, reciprocity, and partnership found there. We find sufficiency and sustainable prosperity when we think of our resources as a flow that is meant to be shared, when we put our full attention on making a difference with what we have, and when we partner with others in ways that expand and deepen that experience.
Our second reading, Growing Apples by Nancy Miller Gomez. There is big excitement in C Block today. On the windowsill, in a plastic ice cream cup, a little plant is growing. This is all the men want to talk about, how an apple seed germinated in a crack of damp concrete, how they tore open tea bags to collect the leaves, leached them in water, then laid the sprout onto the bed made of Lipton. How this finger of spring dug one delicate root down into the dark fannings, and now two small leaves of green are pushing out from the emerging tip. The men are tipsy with this miracle. Each morning, one by one, they go to the window and check the progress of the struggling plant. All through the day, they return to stand over the seedling and whisper. I really enjoy listening to podcasts. I'm not a connoisseur like my wife, but I do love a handful of shows on various subjects. Do any of you listen to podcasts? It's a really great medium for learning and entertainment, and it has become really popular with several million unique shows and millions others episodes created over the past decade. Podcasts are trendy. It seems like everyone has one these days. UUCCI even has a podcast of our Sunday services, which you can listen to as you drive to work, while on vacation, or as you do chores around the house. The UUCCI podcast is not a chart topper per se, but I think it's a great way to listen or re-listen to some of the topics we discuss here on Sundays. One podcast that came out about a decade ago gained immediate popularity, rising to #1 on the charts after only its 3rd episode. I'm speaking of the podcast called Death, Sex, and Money. Are any of you familiar with this podcast, Death, Sex, and Money? Produced by WNYC Studios in New York, it fosters conversations around topics which the creator and host, Anna Sale, says we, quote, think about a lot and need to talk about more, end quote. Death, sex, and money are indeed some of the harder subjects to discuss in society. A lot of the reasons I think we don't talk about these subjects, or these topics, has to do with the cultural norms or the dominant cultural norms, especially those that are shaped by WASP culture, and not WASP like bees, but rather WASP as an acronym for white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. These cultural norms, much of which underpin dominant culture in the US still today, find certain topics improper and even taboo to talk about, especially in public or with non-family members. It would be interesting to consider which of these 3, death, sex, or money, is the most challenging and even frightening for many in society. So I'd like to just do a quick straw poll. How many of you think death is the hardest of those 3 to talk about? What about sex? And what about money? Okay. Personally, I believe money is the most difficult to talk about, especially in congregations, because money in a way combines the other 2 taboos. You see, sex is one form, one mode of expressing passion for someone or something you value in life. Sex, and by extension, love, is not only to be understood in the erotic sense of the word. Truly, there are at least 4 different types of love. Briefly, yes, eros often refers to romantic love. Phileo is more related to the love one might feel toward a friend, almost like a sibling love, or as the name of the city, Philadelphia, literally translates, brotherly love. Storge is probably the least known by many of us, which is the love of community or neighbor. And finally, agape, which is sort of a divine love or an unconditional, universal love, one that Dr. King spoke a lot about during his life. All 4 of these loves are relevant and present topics in our lives together here at UCCI. What we are passionate about, or those things and people that we love, are often the sources of our greatest fear because we know we can lose them. Death is the countermeasure to our love. Death acknowledges that no matter how much we love someone or a community, they, like each of us, are living and flowing in a river of continuous transformation. And one part of that transformation is, of course, death. This congregation is one where we freely choose to float together in life through all of these changes, challenges, and joys we experience along the way. So, sex and death represent both the many forms of love that shape our lives and community, and the preciousness and impermanence of our lives and of our ever-changing congregation and world, which brings us to money. Money, or more broadly, all the types of resources we have, is what makes the precious elements of life possible. It would be nice to imagine that all of this, like this sanctuary and our community and life itself, could be a given, that they and we are simply gifts of existence. But alas, we instead are the ones who make possible the communities we dream about, and we face and fight those precious things that we fear we could one day lose. And not surprisingly, in all of our experiences and unique journeys in life, we approach these tasks, challenges, and opportunities differently. One of the many meaningful books I've read on the topic of money and the fraught themes that go along with it is called The Soul of Money: Reclaiming the Wealth of Our Inner Resources. Lynn Twist takes the reader on a meaningful and emotional journey through one's own relationship and history with money. She explains there are, in a nutshell, two ways to think about money. The first is through a lens of scarcity, and the second through what Lynn Twist calls sufficiency. How we navigate these two determines in part the viability and even survival of ourselves, our communities, and the relationships we foster here. She writes, quote, "Connections forged in a mindset of scarcity, acting on the belief that there's not enough, more is better, or just this is just the way it is, no matter how strong they may seem in the moment, are inherently self-limiting, grounded in a lie. They only undermine our chances for long-term survival and sustainability. The kinds of connections that truly protect and preserve us are those that emerge from the context of sufficiency and the sharing, diversity, reciprocity, and partnership found there," end quote. Twist argues that in communities of reciprocity and partnership, not those of transaction, but rather those of transformation, we can tap into a seemingly endless set of resources found within and among us. In such a community, she believes, quote, "Our resources are not only enough, but they are infinite. When we bring the practice of collaboration and reciprocity," she says, "into conscious view in everyday life, a kind of alchemy and prosperity await, discovery for all around us." Now, why am I telling you this? Well, several reasons, and I will share just two. The first is that today, as we have been preparing for many weeks, is the launch of our 2024 pledge drive. Throughout these past weeks specifically, and more generally throughout the year, we have been nurturing our practice of generosity in community. Today is a more formal way to face the task at hand, the budget goal, which for some may seem like an insurmountable mountain to climb, and others may see as an adventure, a journey, a labor of love that is ours to navigate so we can continue our work in the days to come. The second reason relates to that phrase, a labor of love. I've said it before. Here's a trivia moment. A Labor of Love was the title for one of my very first sermons as your minister, my fourth sermon to be exact, delivered on Labor Day and weekend in 2017. I talked about the labor it takes to nurture and sustain what I called our shared ministry together. I wrote this: "What we do requires labor, but it is, I believe in my heart, a labor of love. There is a love that guides our ministry, that has guided our community for the past 50 years from one moment to the next, from one opportunity to the next. There is a larger love within, among, and beyond each and all of us that transforms our labor here into ministry at that beautiful, fundamental level. When we choose to serve from that space of love, the labor becomes less draining. The joy we feel about what we are doing as a community grows, and the imagination of where we are headed is amplified. End quote. Labor is also the term used to describe the 12 tasks that Hercules underwent, known generally as the labors of Hercules. Each were extreme and life-threatening, and they often included an encounter with the monstrous. The second labor of Hercules is a labor relevant to our themes this morning. This is, as the Wonderbox time alluded to, the battle with the Hydra. The Hydra indeed is the essential monster on which to end our 6-part series this fall. It represents abundance, overwhelm, hopelessness, and seemingly insurmountable odds. The Hydra does so not with one head, but with various depictions by different writers and artists from 6 to 9, even upwards of 50 as well. And as our imagined reenactment this morning showed, that power and might do not always lead to victory and righteousness. These heads, like our fears about death, sex, or money, or about climate catastrophe, domestic violence, or war, replicate with each attack from the would-be hero. We spend our lives, we who gather here this morning in love, hope, and courage, trying to metaphorically vanquish the Hydra. Around every corner in each moment, those fears we each hold can jump out, surprise us, not singularly, but as a multifarious, compounded Frankenstein-ish chimera. This Medusa-like figure can surprise us in its entire. It won't look like a Medusa. Yet, when we begin to look, our willingness to look and look closer, we sometimes then turn away, for the fear will overcome us. And so we shrink, we wilt, we become small, our imagination, our dreaming is small, or we just go to sleep to dream of worlds without monsters where all we hear are children's laughter and the gentle flow of a nearby creek. Our biology, though, our humanity, awakens us from even the best dream to this world where we are tasked with another labor of love, with the new day rising, with the possibility of easing pain, of cultivating community and centering love more fully in the world. But it doesn't just happen. It requires what? Strategy. It is not strength, but strategy that leads to the vanquishing of our monsters. It is not the Lone Ranger, but the courageous community that confronts our fears. It is not your resources alone, but our shared resources that move us beyond scarcity, beyond a smallness, a diminishment of the sacredness that is this life, and toward not only sufficiency, yes, indeed, there will be enough, but to an abundance of love and compassion, care and service to one another and this world. It is in those spaces where strategy, courageous community, and our shared resources are combined that our collective spirit becomes animated, amplified, and ready for whatever we face. My friends, we face not only our monsters, but the hope and possibility of this world. Can you imagine what courage it would take in the face of so much uncertainty, fear, and death to choose love, to choose generosity, to choose one another as beloveds? Such a choice is cause for excitement. Such a choice is worthy of our attention. As Nancy Miller Gomez writes these words, there's a big excitement in C Block today. On the windowsill, in a plastic ice cream cup, a little plant is growing. This is all the men want to talk about. How an apple seed germinated in a crack of damp concrete. how they tore open tea bags to collect the leaves, leached them in water, then laid the sprout onto the bed made of Lipton. How this finger of spring dug one delicate root down into the dark fannings, and now two small sleeves of green are pushing up from that emerging tip. The men are tipsy with this miracle. Each morning, one by one, they go to the window and check the progress of that struggling plant. All through the day, they return to stand over the seedling and whisper. Friends, may we gather close. May we witness the miracle that is our community growing. And may we pour our whispers of love into this seedling we share until that whisper grows and it grows and it grows until not even Hydra can withstand its beauty. May it be so. Amen.